Hello to you all once again, and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague, Steve Kern. How you doing there, Steve?
I'm good. How is everyone out there in FiST Chat land? It's great to be back.
Absolutely. And before we get stuck into the topic, just a reminder, our website, www.fistchat.com. Anything you want to know about us is accessible through that portal, and you can interact with us there as well through our various channels that we've got going. So, okay, what do we get? Today's topic is a story that we came across that sort of piqued our interest. Essentially, a scientist, a British geologist, has volunteered to spend 48 hours in an airtight chamber relying on the oxygen produced by plants to survive. Now, he is going to be in there with a hammock, a laptop, and an exercise bike. And apparently this was done just this past weekend. And I guess the idea is to kind of monitor the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide through the test, and to see whether it would sustain him, I guess, through the weekend. And it's interesting in that, you know, there's just the experiment itself, but also maybe the types of applications it could have. What do you think, Steve?
Oh, look, this is fascinating, and I'm surprised it hasn't been done before. I mean, we've seen it in movies, you know, the whole idea of, you know, sending people out into space and they're living off the oxygen produced by plants. Obviously, plants convert CO2 to oxygen, which is part of the natural cycle here on Earth, and that's done by photosynthesis, which is sunlight hitting leaves and the green bits of plants, yeah. So, but it's never actually been tried before, except maybe in biosphere, which you might want to check up in the 90s, I think it was, where they sealed all those people into the biosphere in the States.
Okay.
And the idea was great big glass conservatoriums, and the idea was that they should be totally self-sufficient in there, growing plants, living off the natural water and food that they could grow, and the oxygen that the plants produced, but that never worked. So you haven't heard from our man in his glass house at the moment. So I've no idea if it was a success or not.
Well, this may be something we can check later in the week and post an update or something.
It's quite dangerous what he's doing, Ben. You know, carbon dioxide in the air around us naturally occurs at 0.038%, which is very, very, very small amount. And oxygen in air is 21%, and nitrogen, which is inert, is 78%. So we need not just, you know, 20% oxygen in the air that we're breathing. We don't want carbon dioxide to get to very high levels, and we breathe it out at 5%. So we take it in a tiny, almost trace element, and we breathe it out at 5%. If you're in a glass box without any plants, you actually die quite quickly.
Okay, well then that's definitely something to catch up on then. Let's see if he's lying on the ground there in the box, sort of ending the experiment. I'm just having a look at the article, and maybe this is something we can look up, and maybe our listeners here can follow up as well. It seems in the original article they mention an experiment tried in the 1770s when he showed a mouse could survive in an airtight chamber full of plants, but not in a box without them.
Yes, well, how big was the box? And you know, mice. Well, mice are actually very similar to humans. Just for everyone out there in FiST Chat land, physiologically that is. Although some people do have heads like mice.
And that's, of course, why they're often used for experiments and such, like drug trials, whatever else, because of that, isn't it?
Absolutely, and if you're fans of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, created by Douglas Adams, and obviously mice white mice are the most intelligent species on the planet.
Absolutely.
But even they need plants to produce oxygen. So
right.
I think this is a really important part. You know, when we're concerned about environmental issues and the fact that they're felling large parts of places like the Amazon, where you've got a lot of trees, where you've got a lot of rainforest. That is a concern because that does affect the Earth's ability to produce oxygen.
Yeah.
And we need it. You know, even though you can produce it electrically, you can use various ways of using energy to break carbon dioxide down into oxygen and carbon. The only problem with that is it's a very, very expensive and energy intensive.
No, okay. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like thinking of this more broadly, you could imagine there'd be some like applications where you could foreseeably see where they might be going with something like this. In that, if you were to create, say, I just heard the other week that the US was building some sort of rocket that could take them further out into space, like Mars and all of that, which I guess was kind of a sort of a foregone conclusion, really. But to see it actually announced and to see what they're doing, and the idea, of course, if they're going to be traveling to such far away places, they're going to have to be able to create sustainable life support systems, not only to get there, but if they're going to stay there, especially like say in a place like Mars, or even if they just go to the moon or something like that, they're going to have to create some sort of habitat, so to speak. And this kind of idea of, in effect, they're going to have to make a big box with plants in them. To be able to do that.
Well, it's really interesting, because this concept, I don't know how it sounds to people that hear it, but you need a box, and that box will be the atmosphere on Mars, because the Mars atmosphere is firstly all carbon dioxide, but secondly, it's far too thin. Okay, it's only 1% of that we have here on Earth. So we need a box to create an atmosphere. When we're also up there, we need food and we need oxygen. And despite all the technology we have, the best way to produce food and oxygen at the same time is to grow plants.
Yep.
They've got it worked out at NASA.
That's right.
Most efficient way. The sunlight that does get to Mars, to the Martian surface, will power the photosynthesis in the plants. That will grow food, and at the same time, you'll have oxygen, and you'll recycle the CO2 that the astronauts are breathing out, and that CO2, the carbon in that, while oxygen's released, the carbon will actually go into the food, which the astronauts will eat. Genius.
Just like a quick question on that. I mean, you mentioned before that nitrogen made a big part of the atmosphere here as well, and and in the mix of it, doesn't there have to be some sort of trying to totally replicate the type of air that we breathe here in that sense? Like it couldn't be like just straight oxygen, straight CO2 sort of conversion.
Oh, gee, now that's a really good question. I think that pretty much you can have 100% oxygen environment.
Right.
I think they used to do that on some of the early American spacecraft. Apart from the fact that that's highly flammable and one spark will burn everything.
Would that affect people though?
It would. Yeah. You get oxygen high, but it all depends on the pressure. So right. You're right. Probably, it depends what the pressure is. And I don't know much about this topic, but nitrogen works really well for us because it's inert. We breathe it in. It's in our blood, but it doesn't do anything at all to us. So you probably want to take a fair bit of nitrogen out there. But you certainly don't want your CO2 levels in what you're breathing in to go much above 0.5%. Yeah. And after you start huffing and puffing.
And do you think there'd be, like, when they're constructing these things, would there be like a limit on how big they could make this, or in terms of practicality, how far could this go, kind of thing? Are we seeing the whole planet taken over, or what?
What, for Mars?
Yeah, say Mars. Yeah, say Mars, for example.
Well, they talk about terraforming. I mean, potentially, if there was enough moisture, in the atmosphere, and if potentially there was enough carbon dioxide in the Martian atmosphere, you might be able to create an atmosphere that was dense enough for oxygen to stick around.
Yeah.
If you got to that level, you may well be able to terraform Mars. The biggest problem with Mars is it is cold, but it is cold because it hardly has any atmosphere.
Yeah.
If you can thicken that atmosphere up with things like water vapor, with carbon dioxide,
anything's possible.
With a little bit of nitrogen, anything's possible.
Yeah.
You might be walking around, on a Martian beach in another 200,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Just returning to the original article here. I was just having a look just to see if they were talking about if they had a very specific aim or not in terms of what they were trying to achieve with this thing. But they've mentioned, looking at the role of plants on the earth and all that sort of thing. But I mean, just like for you personally, like just thinking about an experiment like that, what would you say if you were doing it? Maybe not you in the box, but maybe you in relative safety, monitoring it from a station somewhere.
I'd be using a mouse, Ben. I'd be using a mouse, but
what do you think you would get out of it?
Well, I think it's a great experiment because, people forget how important plants are. They're not just there for eating. They're part of the Earth's machinery that make the world around us. And people constantly forget that, we're surrounded by gas. And that gas we're breathing in, it gives us life. But just because we can't see it, people don't think about it. But that mix is part of the chemical reaction of the planet, and plants are part of that. They are very important. Experiments like this, I really think, are excellent in reminding people just how important our environment is.
Absolutely. Well, that's probably a good place to finish up, and I think too we'll follow the experiment over the course of this week to see what if there's anything announced in terms of if the guy either survived and they had great results, or he was carted out of there in another box.
In another box. In which case they should have used mice.
Exactly right. And it could have been smaller as well. Everything would have been easier to manage. But, you've got to experiment on a human at some point.
Well, absolutely. And apologies to any mice out there listening to FiST Chat.
Especially ones that were in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Okay, so thanks again for that chat, Steve. Enlightening, and again, we'll follow all of this stuff up this week to see how it all turns out. So again, don't forget our website is available, www.fistchat.com. Check in with us there. All our social media, YouTube, RSS feeds, everything there. Until next week, have a good week and we'll catch you then.